March. We're going to talk about it now with our panel in The World This Week. It is The World This Week, 7 days, 4 Paris-based correspondents, 1 hour. The World This Week in partnership with the Daily Beast. Foreign editor Christopher Dickey joins us. How are you, sir?
Fine, good to be here.
Good to see you. Good to see you as well. Rachel Donadio, correspondent at the Paris bureau of the New York Times.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Sylvie Kaufmann, editorial director at French broadsheet of record Le Monde.
Good evening.
And Régis Le Sommier, associate editor-in-chief at French news weekly magazine Paris Match. The World This Week, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, the hashtag World This Week. They've had all summer to come to terms with Britain's decision to leave the EU. So where do the remaining 27 decide to hold a summit? In a fortress, dateline Bratislava, and a setting that sets the tone as leaders grapple over the refugee crisis, the rise of populism, and all the other issues that led to Brexit. Sylvie Kaufmann, we heard just moments ago the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, dodge the question when saying, all right, you talk about shared values. How about those of the Hungarian leader, Viktor Orban? She said, we had a frank discussion, that more will be inclusive. I'm haunted by words that the one Southern European diplomat speaking to Politico said a fake unity would be a failure as much as strong divisions coming out of this summit. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think the worst would have been to show divisions again. I mean, this is a moment they want to rally, and so if they have to rally around shared values, why not? Of course, everybody knows that these values are not so deeply shared by all of the 27, since some of the Central European countries are, like Hungary and Poland at the moment, are preaching a counter-revolution. And so obviously there are tons of problems and tons of motives of divisions. And, you know, there's terrorism, there's populism, the rise of populism, there's Brexit, of course, there's refugees, there, you know, there's no shortage of dividing issues.
Does the EU have shared values at this point?
I think they have, but you know, I think democracy is still something which means, which is meaningful. But there is the refugee crisis has obviously pointed out the very deep divisions between Central Europe and Western Europe. But this, you know, this will take time. This needs more debate, and they don't want to have frank debate at the moment on these issues.
You agree, Régis Le Sommier, there still are shared values among the remaining 27?
Well, it's definitely a difficult time for the European Union. I think it's a difficult time for a number of leaders. It's a difficult time for Angela Merkel, for François Hollande as well. He's never been so low in the polls, and Merkel had just suffered a staunch defeat in the regional elections in her Mecklenburg-Länder. So that said, when the French elections are coming up, you know, next year, and we just mentioned the rise of populism, and it's going like this a bit everywhere. I remember a time when Germany, even during the crisis, the migrant crisis, could say that they were expected the ADF, Alternative for Deutschland, not to raise above 5%. Well, now ADF is above 20% in some lenders. So, and it's risen very, 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 very fast. And now they're coping to that. They could have felt at one point that they were spared from that phenomenon. That Germany, with the amount of work, with the full employment. When you think about Denmark, has full employment. I mean, the economic situation in these countries is not so bad, but the migrant crisis definitely changed a lot of things, a lot of perspective. The European Union right now is is thinking about its identity. A lot of people are looking inwards in order to find, what are their value, and they don't rely so much in the European Union. So I think the will of François Hollande and Angela Merkel to appear together, as a press conference tonight is to show that Europe still exists, Europe is still there, but it's a critical time, I think.
Yeah, and there's lots of tests coming up. Well, before there's the elections here in France or in Germany next year, you've got that referendum coming up in Hungary over whether or not to refuse quotas for letting in refugees and migrants. And you've got a referendum on a domestic issue in Italy, which is a constitutional change, but also in the same climate.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a climate in which the populists are in some ways gaining ground in a rhetorical war, and the European Union leaders, even though they do stand for shared important values like democracy, are having a harder time making their case. I mean, every EU summit kind of seems to get caught up in such technical, bureaucratic language. I was reading earlier that one of the things that they're working on is to deliver on promises, strengthen the mechanism for reviewing the implementation of decisions taken. And it's kind of hard to sell that when the populists are saying, immigrants out, we need to protect our country for what it is. I mean, I think those two referenda that you mentioned take place in the individual contexts of those countries, but, the backdrop is the kind of divisions in Europe.
All right. In his State of the European Union address on Wednesday, the Commission President artfully dodged the issues that divide his employers, like the migrant deal with Turkey, Russia's involvement with Ukraine. He did, though, come down clearly on the side of those who think the answer is more Europe, more public investment, more common border controls, even a common European defense. The point is, Christopher Dickey, that this would streamline costs. And what does Europe weigh if all 27 go their own way?
Not much. And I think that Roger and Sylvie and Rachel have all put it very well. Europe is facing truly an existential crisis. You can have one.
There's a front-page headline in your newspaper.
Yeah, you can have, and we don't need to talk about all the complications. We can talk about one election, the French election. If Marine Le Pen manages to win the French election, and I wouldn't rule that out any more than I would rule out Donald Trump winning the American election, then she is running against Europe. And Hollande and other candidates are going to run for Europe. It's going to turn into a plebiscite on Europe, and that is not good news. The last time there was a plebiscite on Europe, Europe lost in France, and they had to do all they could to rejigger things and bring it back together.
The 2005 constitutional referendum.
So this idea that we're going to have a stronger, better, more cohesive Europe, I think we as Americans, we look at that and we say, hey, that sounds like a good idea. Some of us do. Of course, people in Alabama and Louisiana and Mississippi don't think that way, but here in Europe, people don't want a stronger Europe. People want stronger neighborhoods. They want stronger governments in their own countries. They want to hold on to the identities that they have, all of which they see threatened by the inflow of immigrants. It isn't threatened as much as they say, but they are being convinced by the populists that their identities are fundamentally threatened.
But the irony is that crises like the refugee crisis can be solved only on a European level. I mean, there's no way you can solve this crisis individually, country by country. You have to cooperate. And I think that's why also they choose to concentrate, even if nothing will probably come out of this summit, but they choose to concentrate on security and defense because this is probably the only thing at the moment where you can find
And is this
common ground.
This common defense, is that doable?
We've been playing with this for decades, and I think at the moment it's not doable. But and the fact that the UK is leaving is not a good argument. The argument is, okay, the UK is leaving. It's a very strong country for defense, so we have to do it together without the UK. But I think the fact that the UK is leaving is making us weaker from that point of view.
And they're members of NATO. The UK is a member of NATO, but won't be part of Europe. And, of course, another major member of NATO is Turkey, which is not part of Europe. So the whole idea of a European defense sort of besides NATO? How does that work?
By watching Nicolas Sarkozy interview yesterday, Nicolas Sarkozy remained committed to Europe, but he was asked by a member of National Front during his interview on economic problems, the discrepancy between countries, between level of wages, and the only argument he had on defending Europe was that Europe for 50 years brought us peace. That all comes down to when those leaders that are very involved, like Sarkozy was in the past.
They don't have a good answer to the populace.
They don't have a good answer to the loss of job. They don't have a good answer to the unemployment. They use the argument that we must not forget that Europe brought us peace for over 50 years. Yes, it's a very valid argument, but on a day-to-day basis for a worker in a town, in disfranchised town in France, well, that's not going to play out very well, All
right, many in the EU say when it comes to that common defense, there's no need to spend money on barracks, planes, and weapons. A good army of hackers is what's needed. Case in point, the World Anti-Doping Agency blaming the leaking of athletes' records on Russian cyber espionage group Tsar Team, also known as Fancy Bears. Payback, WADA believes, for the Olympic doping ban on Russian athletes. Ahead of next Sunday's elections in Russia, where there's precious little suspense, Sylvie Kaufmann, what does this story tell you?
The hacker story. Well, these stories about hacking have been all over the place for the past several months. There's hacking interfering with the U.S. election campaign. There's interfering with.
And it's blamed on Russia. But do we have the proof
Russia
for
and
that?
China mostly, but Russia, apparently is playing a big part. Though the White House is very careful not to say it openly. But
Hillary is less careful.
Yeah, there's something fishy there, definitely.
The Kremlin denies.
I guess the Kremlin denies. Yes, the hacking is,
But the Kremlin, I must say that what's been revealed in those hacks is that American athletes don't abide to the other athletes. They've been skipping some tests, and that's another matter. I don't know.
I paid attention to the cyclists. It all seems above board there.
Yeah, but talk about track and field. It's not.
Well, look. Quite apart from the athletes and the Democratic National Committee, all of that. I think it's pretty easy to understand why the Russians would be doing this. If you look at the world through Vladimir Putin's lens, and if you look at recent history, the Russians and the Kremlin have been hacked a number of times. There was a point where one of Medvedev's accounts was taken over. You had all kinds of interference by hackers calling themselves Anonymous International or Humpty Dumpty in Russian affairs. In Putin's world, that means that must be the CIA, and we should take revenge in some fashion. And I'm pretty sure that's what's happened.
From Russia, Edward Snowden has been speaking this week amid a push by civil libertarians for the Obama administration to pardon the intelligence whistleblower, a campaign that coincides with the premiere of Oliver Stone's Hollywood blockbuster with Joseph Gordon-Levitt playing the NSA whistleblower. Régis, you've seen the movie?
Yes, I did.
Because I've seen it's gotten mixed reviews.
Well, I didn't read any review. I just saw the movie last week. I think it's a good movie on an Oliver Stone point of view, I would say, because usually Stone has a tendency to portray his character as there's a little distortion, a little. He likes them very much. He likes Snowden, but this time around, you get to see from within how a big company like the NSA works. I wouldn't say everything in the movie is true, but you get a sense of, they were tempted to look at everybody in the world, getting into your cell phone, getting in your network of friends' cell phone, everything. You see that very, step by step, how it went south and how, in a way, Snowden corrected. But I won't say if Snowden is a traitor or he's a whistleblower and he did good for humanity. But in a way, it really shows step by step how this whole gigantic machine was put out, and why the temptation was so hard, so tempting on the part of the NSA to to look at everybody.
So something that had spiraled
everywhere.
perhaps out of control. On those grounds,
Yes.
should he be pardoned, Rachel Donadio?
Well, I am not going to make a case one way or the other. At the New York Times, we actually have a video interview with Edward Snowden today. He's been making the case for why he believes he should be pardoned. He claims that the disclosures improved privacy in the United States, and his critics, of course, say that he compromised national security. But it is interesting with this new film by Oliver Stone. It is almost this kind of line between what's fact and what's fiction. Reviewing the film in the New York Times, our critic A.O. Scott said that the Oliver Stone film almost felt like the making of the Laura Poitras film Citizen 4, which was the nonfiction account of Snowden.
Which won the
doing
Academy
that,
Award.
Yeah, doing that leak. So it's just kind of everything's a little topsy-turvy this time around.
Christopher Dickey?
Well,
Are you employing discretion when it comes to Mr. Snowden?
No.
So should he be pardoned?
No. No, he shouldn't
No.
be pardoned. No, hell no. He's a traitor. I think the word that has been used for him is traitor. I think that's appropriate. You know, he's living in Moscow now. Is that just by accident? I'm not sure it is. I have no sympathy with this guy. I think the whole cause of his leak, everything that he came out at a time, it's interesting, when people were feeling very safe. It was before the latest waves of terror. So the idea was, why do we need all these invasions of privacy? Why do we need this kind of surveillance? Well, maybe we don't need nearly as much as he was talking about. But the truth is, right now, we need a lot of surveillance. Here in France, we just saw disrupted a network of people who were being managed from Syria on a heavily encrypted, readily available app, Telegram.
Created by Russians.
So if in Snowden's world, the ability to break that encryption, get into those messages before an attack takes place, that's a bad thing. I'm not sure it is a bad thing. I think there are lots of ethical questions, a lot of questions that need to be raised, but taking huge volumes of information and leaking them to the public, and we don't know how much he's leaked to the Russians, I don't see that as a good thing. And I don't think Snowden should be pardoned at all. And I think it's crazy to think that he would be.
Sylvie Kaufmann?
I would tend to say that he should be pardoned, but I understand that for America it's a very, very tough issue, and I'm not part of the American administration or justice system, so it's easier for me to say so. What I regret is that in this big story, huge story that was Snowden, the Snowden affair, the United States never said anything to the Europeans, for instance. I'm not even talking about apologies. I'm talking about telling the truth to allies, telling them what happened, maybe not making it public, but telling, they'd never acknowledged anything, and I think that's wrong.
All right, we're going to move on. We were talking earlier about rumors of the Russians hacking perhaps the U.S. campaign. Rumors and conspiracy theories have abounded. One was kind of laid to rest, but not quite, by Donald Trump. For years, he's been questioning whether or not Barack Obama was born in the United States. Today, he stated that he was, but that this whole rumor was started by his rival.
Clinton and her campaign of 2008 started the birther controversy. I finished it. You know what I mean. President Barack Obama was born in the United States, period. Now we all want to get back to making America strong and great again. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, it's not quite case closed. Rachel Donadio, the Clinton campaign, calling his statement disgraceful.
Yeah, this is just the most surreal postmodern election where it's a breaking news story that the Republican presidential candidate has determined finally that President Obama was born in the United States, a week where Hillary Clinton stumbled and turned out to have had pneumonia. And rather than the campaign narrative being, wow, she's working really hard even while sick, it's, see, we can't trust her. She didn't admit to us sooner that we had pneumonia. But I don't know. It's really, it just feels like it's just the usual way of talking about this election is not applicable anymore.
It's just another example of Donald Trump is running the show, every day. Like the other day, Barack Obama got a very bad reception from the Chinese when he went over there. Well, who talked about it? Donald Trump. So every time, he's getting like free media time.
Yeah, but what's really disturbing here is that he can preach something like the birther myth about Obama again and again and again, and then he denies it. But he knows perfectly well that it's out there among his people. And they won't even believe his denial now. They believe what they want to believe. It's like going into the Iraq War. Cheney and those people were pushing the idea that Saddam Hussein was behind the 9/11 attacks. Eventually, they came out and said it wasn't true. But 60% of voters in 2004, Republican voters, still thought Saddam was behind the attacks.
All right, well, let's give equal time to Hillary Clinton. Her post-convention bounce has vanished in a puff of smoke. She gaffed about Trump supporters. A bout of pneumonia turned into a PR nightmare, as Rachel Donadio just said. And her big return to the campaign trail came Thursday in North Carolina. There, she ditched her signature fight song intro for James Brown's I Feel Good and served up reset button rhetoric after 3 days of convalescence at home.
The campaign trail doesn't really encourage reflection. And it's important to sit with your thoughts every now and then. And that did help me reconnect with what this whole campaign is about. People like me, we're lucky. When I'm under the weather...
Sylvie Kaufman, are you convinced by Hillary Clinton there?
Well, I think the whole thing is quite unfair to her. I mean, she made a huge mistake of not telling right away that she had been diagnosed with pneumonia. Or saying, I feel fine, when she wasn't. Yes, exactly. So she lied, or she omitted to tell the truth. And that's not good, because the Clintons have this habit of not telling the truth until they really have to, until they are pushed to. So there's a level of distrust to her which polls show is a problem. But the standards to which she's
being held are not the same as the ones Donald Trump is held to. Donald Trump lies all the time. I mean, the guy pretending for years that the President of America was not born in the U.S. And suddenly he says, oh, yes, he was. He just lied. It says it's Clinton who started the story.
Yes, I mean, anything goes. But it's so enormous that people just get used to it.
But there's even today, last week, Paul Krugman in the New York Times did an op-ed where he talked about this notion of post-truth policy, which is, you say a certain amount of lies. He was describing Trump, but we can say the Clintons also have, the Clintons, never trust the first answer to a question by a Clinton, whether it's Bill or Hillary, because it's never come out with, it carries some truths, but, there's always some twist in it. But with Trump, the lies are not that big, but there's so many that the media don't know which one to pull out. And then the campaign goes, and then another day. That's what Krugman's called post-truth policy, which is this sort of
It's an avalanche of lies.
And just very quickly,
to report in that context.
How does she handle the debates? What does she do when the debates come around?
I don't know. I've been saying this for a long time. I think it's a real problem. The idea that she's so in command of the facts that that'll make everything work. I don't know if you saw here in Europe the commander-in-chief interviews that were back-to-back a few days ago. They were both terrible. I think the headline in the Daily Beast was both candidates self-destruct. But when Trump starts lying to her, if she says, for instance, the famous Patrick Moynihan line, you're entitled to your own opinions but not your own facts, it won't matter because people can't tell the difference between opinion and fact anymore.
It's almost as if these two candidates are on different television channels, and Trump is on this reality TV show where his supporters in some ways don't even care maybe what he says. It's just entertainment. And she's very well prepared and she's done all her homework, and it's almost like C-SPAN, which is the channel that broadcasts a lot of congressional hearings in the U.S. And I don't know how they're going to do it. It's like a split screen. It's like a split screen debate.
I think also the problem with her, and this will come out, I think, in the debates, and it came out with the pneumonia issue, it's hubris. It's not lying. It's the arrogance. And it is that feeling that the Clintons think they're just above the rules.
But what about Trump's arrogance?
No.
But with Hillary, this feeling of being in control is totally devastated by this video of her stumbling. I don't know if she's ever going to recover from that, because for an American point of view, whoever runs wants to be the president has to be somebody standing up, not somebody stumbling. And that's I think the fact that Trump's coming back in the polls is due to that feeling. Who are we going to elect that woman? We don't know. Maybe she's in bad health. Maybe she's going to get a stroke or something. And people need to be reassured by some strong guy and
give me a break.
Well, I don't think anybody here wants to see Trump be president.
I'd like to give you a break, but look at what's written underneath Hillary Clinton. Stronger. I think if it was not Donald Trump, her opponent, that won't be the message. That won't be her message. She has to keep up with this.
It's also a campaign when you can replay things endlessly on videos, on Twitter. I mean, David Petraeus fainted during hearings on Afghanistan in Congress, and it wasn't, oh my God, he's so weak. It's, oh, he fainted, he must be ill.
Well,
and
George
Bush vomited in an Asian summit. True. I know, but that I think now just the echo, the kind of feedback loop exacerbates things.
All right. Two other stories we're following for you. Trump, more than meeting his match in the Philippines, where the new president is no political novice. Rodrigo Duterte, who recently called the U.S. president the son of a whore over criticism of a war on drugs that resulted in more than 2,400 extrajudicial killings since he was elected in April. This week, some damning allegations before a Senate panel from an ex-death squad hitman when Duterte was mayor of the southern city of Davao.
This is you, Chris.
Duterte ordered us to kill. We didn't even know the names of the victims. They just call us and ask us to kill someone. My conscience has been weighing on me. People were killed like chickens in Davao City. They were being killed for no reason.
Duterte's handlers deny all, and the foreign minister in Washington at a think tank conference minced no words.
We cannot forever be the little brown brothers of America. At one point in time, we have to mature, we have to develop, we have to grow and become the big brother of our own people, of the next generation of Filipinos. And it is in this respect that I feel you manage it correctly. You do not go to the Philippines and say, I'm going to give you something. I'm going to help you develop. I'm going to help you grow. But these are the checklists that you must comply with. We will lecture you on human rights.
How should Washington respond to that, Christopher Dickey?
I think Washington is doing pretty much what it should do and has to do. I think his choice of words was interesting. We have to be the big brother? Yeah, that's exactly what's going on, a murderous big brother. They've killed 3,000 people in extrajudicial killings so far. This is just the beginning of the administration. Now, is that going to make everything much safer in the Philippines? I doubt it. But eventually, it's going to lead to some kind of warfare in the streets. But I think at the end of the day, all that the Americans can say is, we wish you wouldn't do that. We think it's a bad idea. We find it difficult to give money to people who are doing this kind of thing. And when there's hell to pay, good luck.
Finally, first week back to school for the citizens of earthquake-struck Amatrice, one of several towns devastated last month. The education minister was on hand for the opening of classes. And for primary and secondary school, as you can see, those classes held in containers. The school itself collapsed in the quake. Surprising since it cost the state 700,000 euros back in 2012 to supposedly make that school earthquake-proof. Rachel Donadio is former bureau chief in Rome for the New York Times. What's your reaction to this? Is somebody going to go to jail over this?
I'm sorry to say that Italy is earthquake prone, and every time there is an earthquake, buildings collapse and people die. In Amatrice and in Umbria in August 24th, about 300 people died. And then there are always a lot of recriminations. Why wasn't this done? Why weren't things built to code?
But in this case, they actually spent 700,000 euros to make it earthquake.
I have a feeling someone will go to jail for this. And now that they're going to school in containers, I mean, the question is, how long will they be in the containers? When can they rebuild? And there are usually a lot of polemics about that. There's a saying in Italy that there's nothing more permanent than a temporary solution. So we'll see how things go in Amatrice.
All right, we'll leave it there. I want to thank you, Rachel Donadio, Régis Le Sommier, Christopher Dickey, Sylvie Kaufmann. Stay with us, though. Our Media Watch segment is next. And we say hello to Emma James.
Hi there.
So the U.S. elections, every day brings its surprises. You got to keep up. Régis was saying you got to keep up with the lies in some cases.
How rude. But yes, you're probably very right with that. We are less than 2 months away now, and the surprises do just keep on coming. What is interesting, though, is that really personalities are so key in this election now, that Hillary Clinton seems to have taken, after that very literal stumble in her campaign, she seems to have taken a decision to try to really lighten the mood and poke fun at herself. If we take a look at this tweet, she says, "The good news is that my pneumonia finally got some Republicans interested in women's health," which is, you know, a fun way to point out an issue that she wants addressed. And also, when she came out in North Carolina, she wanted to come out fighting, hence the reason for choosing James Brown's I Feel Good, which must have seemed to her advisors like an absolute no-brainer, best idea in the world. However, what the Telegraph and many other people are pointing out is that James Brown died of pneumonia in 2006. The Telegraph says here, Clinton may well feel good, but her campaign managers might begin to feel queasy themselves when they realise the grim irony of their choice. So that is really rather unfortunate for Hillary, it has to be said. The Atlantic, looking at the fact that there are all these conspiracy theories saying she's sicker than we're being told, and a lot of people obviously laying the blame at the Republicans' doormat. However, what the Atlantic says is that it is in fact a lot of people who are refusing to let go of the idea that Bernie Sanders should have been the Democratic nominee. They are helping to add to these conspiracy theories.
Did you sense that, Christopher Dickey?
Oh, yeah. I think there are a lot of Bernie Sanders diehards who are a real problem for her. And in fact, we have a piece on the Daily Beast right now where he's talking about Trump in a fairly friendly way. You know, thanks, Bernie. You know.
Do you realize that this birther story has completely overshadowed the fact that Donald Trump delivered this one-page bill of health from his physician, his personal physician?
Highly dubious.
Frankly, yes, looks like it was written by the man himself. He describes his health as being absolutely excellent. And at the end of the letter, I think it says something...
Did he say huge?
He may have well have done it. But the last line is something like, if he becomes president, he'll be the healthiest man ever to hold the office. Just ludicrous. And I fail to understand why anyone would believe that's genuinely written by a doctor.
Now he was on a television show, and the host is a doctor, and he got a bit of a grilling for giving him what was called a softball interview. But there was since then there's other stuff.
He's been on Jimmy Fallon. The Tonight Show, starring Jimmy Fallon, and there has been quite a backlash about this because it was all a very chummy affair. It was also an opportunity to find out that his hair really is attached to his head. Let's take a look at the clip.
Can I mess your hair up?
The answer is yes, but the people in New Hampshire, where I'm going to be in about an hour from now, I hope they're going to understand. Okay?
You say yes?
Go ahead, with my hairspray.
Entertainment show, right?
It is an entertainment show. However, people are still very unhappy, even though they know he's not a journalist. As this Twitter user says, I don't fault Jimmy Fallon for not being a journalist. I do fault him for his willingness to serve as hell's court jester. Another similar theme here. And here it is, the American establishment starts to humanise and welcome him as he might be their next president. Another Twitter user in the same vein, I will never watch Jimmy Fallon again. That's how strongly I feel about humanising a monster. And when we take a look at this image that Huffington Post have chosen to highlight, you can see Jimmy Fallon clearly roaring with laughter there. What he was actually laughing about was just Trump saying he wonders what happens when he orders foods in restaurants and he's worried that if he's recognised, somebody might do something to it. That is what Huffington Post believes is rather an overreaction to a not all that funny joke.
Rachel Donadio, do you fault Jimmy Fallon?
If you have an opportunity to interview a presidential candidate, I think you do the interview. So I understand.
Even if you're not officially a journalist.
Well, as we know from Jon Stewart, who was not officially a journalist and was in some ways one of the best journalists in past election campaigns. I mean, I think that the line between real journalism and not real journalism, unfortunately, is a little bit blurry. And I hope maybe he'll interview Hillary.
All right, no free pass for Jimmy Fallon from Rachel Donadio. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you, Emma, and thank you for joining us here in The World This Week.